Nicola McDougall, your life is very much intertwined with real estate. You're the National President of PIPA, Property Investment Professionals of Australia. Your business, Bricks and Mortar Media, is all about real estate, and you're a property investor yourself. Do you remember how it all started? Your first property, when you bought it, how much you paid for it? Do you still have it?
Yes. No, I don't actually, and I do regret that, to tell the truth. I only sold it 2 years ago, though, and had it for 15 years. But my experience with property is familial. It's family. You know, my grandfather in New Zealand had a cabinet making business, but he also owned commercial land in the middle of a city, which ended up being quite lucrative for the family. My dad was a business owner as well, and owned a number of residential property investments too. And here I am, decades later, and I'm a business owner and a property investor. So I certainly learned from my forebears. But my first property investment, I didn't buy my first property till I was in my early 30s, which surprises some people. But that's because I spent my 20s travelling overseas pretty much and going to university, but getting into adventures overseas and changing and maturing and all those things. So I bought my first property, which was a townhouse in Middle Ring suburb here in Brisbane in early 2007, and I actually bought that with my younger brother as tenants in common, because I was obviously really keen to buy property, and by that stage I'd been working at the REOQ for about 6 months, and so I literally bought my first property as soon as I financially could afford to do so, because up until that point I actually hadn't been earning a lot of money as a journalist. I've been travelling a lot, been a student, so as soon as I had actually saved enough money to buy a property, I did, and it cost $350,000, which was more than 6 times my annual income at the time. I thought that was a horrendously high price to pay, and as I mentioned, I only sold it a couple of years ago to recycle that money into a property on the Sunshine Coast.
So what's the basic philosophy you've evolved with that underpins your property investment?
Yeah, I think people might say that I, would be likely to say this, but I have had the benefit of having a lot of mentors along the way, and I guess because I have worked in property since 2006, so this year's my 18th year, I've had the benefit of being surrounded by experts, so that has really informed my decision making. Even back in 2007, I remember leaning on the chairperson of the REOQ at the time, the CEO, asking for their advice and things like this. So I've been very lucky over the years to have the benefit of these people that have passed on their wisdom to me, which I've learned. And generally speaking, my property investments I've bought as a solo person, apart from when I did buy that first one as tenants in common with my brother. But that actually, I bought him out within a couple of years. So I've always been probably limited in regards to my borrowing capacity because I've been a single woman. So my philosophy's been, obviously doing my research and working with experts where possible, buying the best that I could when I could, and that generally for me, I have got a few apartments in my portfolio. Should I have bought more houses? Probably yes. Could I have afforded to? Probably no. So probably the best apartment I have in my portfolio is an Art Deco unit that has increased in value significantly. It's in a blue chip suburb in Brisbane. So I've done the best that I could with what I had, as my dad would say.
And some of those apartment investments may be coming into their own because some of the really important trends that we're seeing is more and more people are opting for apartments for various reasons, for lifestyle, for affordability, and we're starting to see apartments challenge that dominant paradigm in real estate that houses on land always show better capital growth. No longer the case in some cases.
Well, that's right. I mean, my apartment, as I say, it's in a blue chip inner city suburb. Probably has done as well as houses in that area because it is very unique. There's not many Art Deco in that suburb. But for me, as a single person who has always travelled a lot, even as a business owner and things, and I've worked from home for 8 years, I've always all of my properties that I've lived in have, apart from a house in the Sunshine Coast for a few years, have been apartments or townhouses, because I like them. That's my first choice of where I want, what the type of property I want to live in, and also the type of property I've generally invested in, because I like a lock up and leave lifestyle, and I'm not a green thumb.
and a low maintenance lifestyle.
Oh, 100%. Maybe not the Art Deco, but you have to keep on top of that since it's a beautiful old building. But with that, comes uniqueness and scarcity.
Well, that probably does speak to one of the prime philosophies of buying apartments is trying to find something that has some kind of uniqueness about it, some individual quality, rather than buying a generic apartment in a high-rise property with 300 or 400 of the same.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, look, I, that apartment, until I bought my property on the Sunshine Coast, clearly was the best one in my portfolio. And I think I've spoken to you before, but I've certainly been on the record before about, unfortunately, making the mistake of buying, what was it, a cookie cutter? Probably is a little cookie cutter apartment in South Brisbane. I still own that property, but now after quite a few years it is actually starting to achieve quite good results and has very, very strong cash flow, which is working out very well for me. And the price points of something similar in that same area now would be significantly higher than what I paid. But I bought that many years ago before I actually really understood, many years ago before I really understood property investment strategy thoroughly. Yeah.
Now, some people tried to trade their way to wealth in real estate. They buy and sell. Is that the way to go, or do you have the philosophy that you should accumulate good property and just build a portfolio?
Yeah, I'm definitely portfolio driven. I've bought a number of properties and only sold one. And the one that I sold, I only did so to recycle it into something better with development potential on the Sunshine Coast. I still regret selling it though, probably once a week. Because at the time, once a week I'll think about it or make some kind of under my breath comment of, oh, I got this much for it, but now they're worth X, So I still regret that, and maybe I'm not emotional about my property investments at all, but I'm emotional about the fact that I sold one of them. Even though I've recycled into something much better, it still kind of pains me that I did that. And look, not everyone is able to do that. That first townhouse that I bought, where at the time everyone said, oh my lord, what are you doing going out there? And it was 10 k's from the Brisbane CBD, which seemed a long way in 2007. I've managed to borrow against that property twice. And admittedly, yes, I was single, but I probably was earning a little higher income over the years to be able to do that. But I'm also not afraid to take on debt. Probably my total mortgages by myself were in the vicinity of 1.6, 1.7 million, and that didn't bother me in the slightest. So I just, maybe because of my education, obviously in this area, my family history, I clearly have high tolerance for risk in regards to that. So that never bothered me to take on those extra funds. So not everyone's like that, but you can be if you actually, do your research and perhaps work with experts to help guide you.
Yeah, the ability to be comfortable with debt may be one of the answers to this next question.
Okay, jump the gun a little bit.
No, that's fine. But this is all about helping people become part of the 1%, and by that we mean the records show that fewer than 1% own 5 or more properties. Most people own just 1 or maybe 2. Why is it that so few people actually get to be part of that 1% where they own what we might call a portfolio, 5 or more properties?
Yes, well, the answer to my previous question, but I think even if you own 3 or more properties, you clearly are okay with having high levels of debt, because you wouldn't even get to that point, I don't think. No one's actually, maybe we need to do some more research into this, because we can sit here and talk anecdotally about why we think this is, right? And the stats don't lie. It always shows through the ATO data that the vast majority of investors own the one property, about 70%. Why is that? I tend to believe, from what I've learned over these 18 years, is that they don't get the first one right. They stuff that up. They might buy one down the road from where they currently live, or they might actually, go off and just say, in 30 years' time I might like to retire in this location that actually doesn't have anything going for it, and that property, flatlines. And at the end of the day, if they don't get their first property right, they're not going to be able to multiply from there, because especially, you have to use, majority of people don't have the cash flow to just keep on going off and buying properties. You need to actually leverage the equity in your dwellings, and if that property is not growing in value, reasonably, you're not going to be able to do that. So I think in answer to that question, it's really about getting that, how vitally important that first one is. And I think I did the best that I could in 2007. I've often said I knew a lot about real estate, but I didn't know a lot about property investment. But I tapped into the brains of a couple of, legends of real estate here in Queensland, who I had the fortune of working with at the time. So I think I lucked out. And I didn't luck out, I actually did what I needed to do to make sure that that first one that I bought would prove to be exceptional in regards to capital growth. And it was affordable for me at the time. I did what I needed to do to purchase it, which was my little brother came in as a very minority share, tenants in common, and I held it for the long term, which is 15 years in my experience. So I think that's it. Don't stuff up the first one, to use that lexicon.
I think one of the reasons why people do get the first one wrong, and one of the problems a lot of people have with property investment, is a lack of willingness to invest in advice and information. They're willing to get a loan and spend maybe the $500,000 on a piece of real estate, but unwilling to spend relatively small sums of money to make sure they get that purchase right. Do you think that's a big part of the problem?
I think so as well, and clearly, I have been involved with Pippa on the board for 10 years now. And Pippa's been around for nearly 20 years, and that's certainly what we've been trying to do over these many years, is to encourage and educate consumers about the value of working with paid experts and professionals such as yourself, as well as buyers agents, or the variety of people that we have as members in our membership. Because exactly right, like you see how much research someone does to buy a car and all these stuff, buy a pair of shoes or whatever. And a lot of people in the past, I think people are changing. I think property buyers are recognising that they can't just take a stab in the dark with this and hope for the best. We are seeing, a rising cohort of people who are prepared to pay for professional advice from experienced practitioners who've been in the game for a long time, got runs on the board. So I think that is changing, and the more that can become a normal part of the property investment sort of sector, the better it is for everybody. Because then that means that person who might have paid, a small sum of money in the grand scheme of things, is perhaps hopefully going to go off and buy a superior asset to what they were going to do, which would allow them not only to perhaps attract a greater cash flow over the years, but to hold it for the long term. So not only is that going to give them better financial future, but it's actually going to create a more stable rental supply, which is something that's severely lacking at the moment.
Now, one of our standard pieces of advice at Hotspotting is build your team before you build your portfolio. It's speaking to the same theme. I think it's really important to gather around you experts and mortgage brokers, buyers agents, accountants who understand real estate.
And it's vital to do it early because, time is of the essence when you're purchasing real estate, and certainly in hotter market conditions. And we're in that now. We're about to probably be in it even more this year, given the inflation figures that came out recently. So time is of the essence. You don't have a lot of time, and it's very rarely that you're not going to have a multiple offer situation on a good asset, good real estate asset, and often you're going to be buying at auction. So you have to have your ducks in a row, and those ducks are your experts. So you need to have them on board long before you even start looking, because you don't have time to do it post offer. You really, and if you do, that opens up the door for mistakes to be made with long-term serious financial consequences. So definitely get your team together, your property researchers, whether it's your buyers, your mortgage, definitely your mortgage broker, if you're working with a broker, your conveyancer, all of these people, even find out who the best building inspector is for your area, building and pest, the best property manager as well. Because don't just, if you're buying an investment property, don't just use the property manager of the sales agency that happens to be selling that property. So all of these things need to be done, and we're not talking about spending 2 years, but maybe for a few months before you actually okay, I'm going to be ready to go then. Just spend some time in the months leading up to it, getting your team together.
Okay. With the benefit of hindsight, knowing what you know now, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give to the 25-year-old you?
Oh, well, 25, I was having the time of my life. Yes, I would just say enjoy it. Look, I think that I would tell her that everything will work out all right. I mean, for me, when I was 25, I actually went to uni. I did go straight to uni from high school, and my head wasn't in it, or my heart. And so I actually left, which broke my dad's heart at the time, worked for a couple of years and went to live in London. And then I gallivanted around the countryside and around Europe and the Middle East and various places for many, many years. And so I went back to uni when I was 26 and did journalism. And I remember at the time feeling I was really old and that I'd left it too late. So I graduated when I was 29. Won a number of awards as being the top journalism student. Managed to get a really good cadetship. Obviously, had a very successful journalism career from there. So I'd probably tell her that, because I did feel that I was really old, but I wasn't. I'm mature. It was probably the start of mature age students. And I wasn't really mature age, I suppose, but it seemed like it at the time. Certainly wasn't very mature. So that's probably what I would say, and I'd probably just say to her, it's going to work out, and you won't believe where you're going to be in 25 years.
So what's the biggest mistake that you've made with your property investment that if you could go back you would avoid and urge people not to repeat?
Definitely the off-the-plan unit that I bought in South Brisbane in 2012. I was attracted to the salesman. Let's be honest, he was a good salesman. And again, I hadn't actually started working in property investment then. It wasn't far off that before I started working at Australian Property Investor magazine. I just wish that it was $425,000 off the plan, and if I had used that $425,000 to buy a little house, and I probably could have gone into Bald Hills, I probably could have gone into Mount Gravatt, around there, well then, I would have doubled my money and then some. So that would probably be, that is the biggest mistake that I've ever made, and I held on to it, just because I don't really have the ability, well, I probably do in a way, but I don't really have the ability to replace it with anything. And finally, after all these years, maybe it's my Scottish stubbornness, I've actually held on to it for all this time, and now it's actually doing all right after 10 years, which is stupid, right? Because I should have got rid of it years ago, but I didn't. And now that it's actually starting to achieve results, my stubbornness is like, well, I can't get rid of it now.
But it does speak to one of the fundamentals of real estate. You've got to take a long-term view, and sometimes...
Oh, definitely, I suppose. Sometimes it does take 20 years, I guess. And for me, that there is still... I was literally thinking about this when I was waiting for our chat. There is... The particular location where I bought is extraordinary. I bought on the top floor. There is actually like a plethora of major infrastructure that's happened around this apartment block. I'm walking distance to the new Queen's Wharf development, which didn't exist at all. Literally, it'd probably take me a couple of minutes walk to the bridge. So there's still a chance that I actually might go and live in that myself, because the location is actually where I want to be. So maybe in the end, maybe that's what I'll end up doing is live in this place that as an investment, it was good for some reasons, but maybe that's actually where I always wanted to be.
Its time has come.
Well, perhaps.
So just to finish, what do you think are the biggest myths and misconceptions that people have about real estate investment?
Oh, goodness. That you can make money quick. probably. I always call it a get rich slowly scheme, but that's just not that sexy, is it? And human nature, everyone's looking for the holy grail of real estate that can make you rich in a couple of years. I think that's the main thing. And it's hard because property investment doesn't need to be stressful, nor does it need to be difficult, but it's not necessarily easy either. So that's a bit of a muddled answer. But clearly, given my experience over the last 18 years, what I do for a living, who I work with, who I represent, the value, what I've learned, from all of these wonderful people that I've had the benefit of working with, over the decades, that has allowed me to now give back as much as possible, whether it's through my role with Pippa, whether it's through the books that I've authored. I think that the rise of the, I guess, the rise of the property investment sector becoming more professional, becoming more ethical, I think is good for everybody. And so the biggest misconception out there is the fact that people can do it better than experts that have been doing it for decades themselves, I suppose. People say, of course, Nicola, you're going to say that, but look, I know that to be true.
Thank you, Nicola.
You're welcome, my friend.